Gettysburg?
Well, Gettysburg was a significant battle in the Civil War. It's referred to in many different terms, but I suppose one of the most common terms is the high water mark for the South, or terms such as that. It was the furthest incursion of the Southern forces into the North. Gettysburg, of course, is taken from the name of a town there. It's a town in southern Pennsylvania, the rolling hills of southern Pennsylvania, not far from Maryland, really. And that's what Gettysburg is. Primarily an agricultural community at the time, though there was a seminary there, and it's a little bit different currently, but that's essentially what it was. It is a place where the Union also turned the course of the overall war at that time.
Yeah.
Those
I can answer those for sort of specific questions. Are you aware of any strategic importance of the town area itself?
I believe that it was not a strategic site in and of itself. It was it happened more or less by chance. General Lee, in fact, didn't want to fight there, wouldn't have chosen that ground. At least that's my understanding of it. There are some, certainly there are strategic points around Gettysburg itself. There's high ground, which the North was able to gain control of and hold.
As far as Lee goes, you mentioned he didn't want to do battle on it, and is it?
I don't think it was his
intention.
intention to fight there, no. And it really started out as a skirmish. The Confederate soldiers were looking for shoes and thought they might be able to obtain some in Gettysburg. And so there were initial contacts between relatively small Confederate and Union forces, and which escalated, of course.
You can just generalize here. Where did the battle take place in and around the area?
Generally towards the south of Gettysburg, though the battle ebbed and flowed. On the first day, in the beginning, it's my understanding that much of the fighting went on west of Gettysburg, and the Union forces were pushed right back through town, but as I said just a little bit earlier, they gained the high ground, and there they held. The high ground, by the way, that they held was just south of the city, excuse me, the town of Gettysburg.
The date of Gettysburg, the battle?
The battle itself lasted over 3 days. I believe the battle was on July 1st, 2nd, and the 3rd. People will talk about, where did it actually begin, and I guess you could talk about the movements of various armies and Lee's decision to penetrate the North and take the war to the North is possibly a start of that. But the battle itself is usually counted over those 3 days, to the best of my recollection anyway.
What were the Union's initiatives at the battle itself?
To engage the Confederate forces. I think it was essentially the Army of Virginia, but there were certainly Confederate forces from many different parts of the Confederacy. But it was to engage them there to prevent a further incursion into the north, and to not allow them of the use of Northern Territory. Now, the purpose itself the purpose for the North, I think, probably had a process, or in other words, the initial goal was they needed to protect Washington. They had to keep the Confederate forces from not only the invasion of the North, but turning right down the highways, which would have led directly to Washington, D.C. At that point, if they hadn't been able to hold them. So that was a significant aspect of it, at least in the early parts of that battle. You could see that developing, I believe. Later on, and as it developed, President Lincoln had wanted to utilize that battle to totally defeat the South, at least the forces of the Confederacy that were mustered there in the East, and in fact was quite displeased with General Meade, who was the commander, the general in charge of the Union forces there. He's very displeased with General Meade because he did not pursue General Lee's forces after they retreated or started to retreat.
Mm-hmm. What were the Confederates' main objectives?
As I said, the main objectives initially were to get shoes.
Well, that's...
So the objectives probably really evolved, is the word I'm trying to find, evolved. So initially, as I said, they were trying to get shoes. Supplies. They were very short of supplies. They were trying to live off the land, at least to some extent, and they were short of shoes. Later, I believe it was General Lee's hope to defeat the Army, Union Army there, and to really gain a foothold in the North to remove the war from Virginia and bring it further north. Of course, Lee himself was from Virginia, and the war had caused a great deal of damage and suffering in that state already, so he was making every attempt he could to divert it away from that state, his own state.
Mm-hmm. What were the immediate results afterwards? After the battle, what was the situation?
Well, when the battle was over, there was a tremendous amount of devastation, but this was primarily in human terms, because there had been large losses, the numbers of which I can't quote you, of course. You can look them up in any text, I guess. But the aftermath is quite interesting, and that also involved. One aspect of it, as I told you, was that General Lee escaped with his somewhat damaged forces back south across the Rappahannock, and And for the North, in some ways it was considered a victory in terms of preventing further incursion into the North. President Lincoln himself, and this is it turned into more of a political evolution in terms of it being a springboard and an alteration in the politics of the war itself, from simply preserving the Union to turning it into a war of principles in terms of realizing the full potential of freedom and liberty in this country, and applying that to all the people that lived here, not just restricted to certain classes of people.
What would you call the victor?
I would have to say the Union would be the victor there. Yes, it could be argued that maybe they should have taken advantage of the victory they had at that point in time, and of course that was Lincoln's argument. However, from all the indications that we have, both from documentation from those directly involved at the time and from information that we've been able to surmise from that, for instance, that really that both armies were quite exhausted and probably not able to fight much more. There were a tremendous number of dead and wounded, as I said. They required attention. About the supply situation, I don't know, but I know that was a critical problem, at least for the South, and it was probably less of a problem for the North of being on their own ground. But other than that, you'd have to say it was a Union victory.
In short terms, what was the long-term result of Gettysburg?
Could you clarify that question a little bit, please?
Would you say it was the exact turning point in the war? That its end
You mean the
result
battle or the
Yeah.
war? I'm sorry.
What effect did the battle have on the war?
Oh, I see. Okay, yes. Well, it had a tremendous effect in several ways, both militarily and politically. Militarily, it was a boost in the morale for the North, who had had difficulty, even though they had superiority in materiel and probably in just the number of soldiers they were able to put on the field. They had severe problems with leadership, and they had severe problems in getting adequate and appropriate and leadership in their army. So it was a morale boost in terms of having a victory, although there had been some victories up then. I think by and large the South had prevailed militarily, in a large part because of the brilliance of their military leaders. Politically, it was important in terms of changing the war from one of what are states' rights and what are who can and cannot secede from the Union and the right to desert the Union, to one of a little bit of a higher ground. And Lincoln really put it took advantage of this, and really he made his own opportunity, I believe, really, but converted it in terms of just preserving the Union to one of freedom, the same rights for all populations. And so I think it was critical for that reason.
Are you aware of any relatives that fought in Gettysburg?
Yes.
Just tell me the name at this point.
Yes, Aaron Ben, Aaron, Ben.
What division was he in? Or
He was,
could you tell me like the whole hierarchy maybe? The Army to
well, I can tell you that he was in the 137th New York Militia. He was in that regiment. He was in Company F.
This is all off of the Army of the Potomac?
Yes, I believe that you would call it that. Don't quote me on that, though. I think you would want to take a look at that. I can tell you more specifically, or try to tell you if you'd like me to refer to my notes. That might be useful to give the the chain of command kind of thing.
So it's 137 New York Militia?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I guess you could try.
Yeah. Go ahead. Aaron Ben was in the 137th New York Infantry, 3rd Brigade, 2nd Division, 12th Corps in the Army of Potomac. The Army of the Potomac was under Major General George G. Meade. And I believe Colonel Ireland was in command of the 137th. In fact, I think there's an Ireland Avenue or Ireland Street, isn't there, in the Binghamton area, by the airport? Probably named after them.
Okay.
The 3rd Brigade was commanded by Brigadier General George S. Green.
I could probably just look all this up. What's that page?
Oh, this is under the U.S. Army War College Guide to the Battle of Gettysburg. Look on page 222 for the specifics of the 137th New York.
222?
That's correct. Page
Okay.
222.
I'll just move on here. What arena of fighting was Aaron Ben in?
What unit?
What arena, like, within the battle?
On Culp's Hill. On or near Culp's Hill.
Could you tell me off the top of your head what specifics about that arena of fighting? Maybe like the Confederates perhaps charged?
Yes, it's my understanding that this is a battle that occurred and is referred to as the battle in the twilight. It was actually went on into the evening, into the darkness, so that much of the fighting was seen in terms of musket flashes going off, and not too much more, at least with the fighting that went on the night of July 2nd. At least initially it was thought to be a diversion from another attack that was to occur on the Union left flank, but this would be the Union right flank. If you can envision a fish hook with it turned upside down, the place where you're tying the line being at Little Round Top, and heading up towards the town of Gettysburg and then curving around to Culp's Hill where the point would be. And that's where the 137th New York Infantry was.
Was this at the very end Like, would you
At
say?
at the very end, at the very end.
Could
of
you,
the line.
could you get out that map that would show that?
Well, let's see if we have one here. The layout of the lines of battle is drawn up on July 2nd. That's this map here that I'm pointing to and tapping. And this is the fish hook that I was trying to describe. The blue are the Union forces. The lines drawn in red represent Confederate lines of battle. Naturally, I want to draw your attention to the fact that these lines would ebb and flow depending on the course of the day. They could change, by the hour. But in general, this is how it was laid out, with the town of Gettysburg to the north of them.
Okay, where's Culp's Hill on that map?
Well, it's about here.
Right there somewhere.
Mhm.
And where was the Aaron Ben's division? Regiment?
Right there.
Right on Culp's Hill.
Yes.
And the attack from the Confederates came, as these arrows show.
Right. There's a faint red arrows showing an attack coming this way.
So he was directly on the very end of the Union line, you were saying?
Yes.
Would you say the Confederates were trying to outflank the
Yes.
Federals?
Yes.
Because that was very important in those days?
That's a military tactic.
Uh-huh.
It's an important tactic in any day, because if you can turn the end of an army, you can get behind their lines.
Did Aaron Ben survive the battle?
Yes. Yes, he sure did. Yeah, and he certainly lived to continue fighting with his outfit,
Well, yeah, I'm just going to cut in for a
with the
second.
12th Corps anyway.
Just gonna cut in for a second. Could you tell me, generalize what you know about what happened to him?
Yes. On the night of, I believe it was the 2nd, or it could have been the early hours of the 3rd, but I think it was the night of the 2nd, records have it that he was captured. The exact circumstances aren't certain, though it's thought that his company, Company F, were on the most distant flank of the Union right, and that while the Confederate attack was finally successfully resisted and stopped at Culp's Hill, there was a tremendous amount of fighting right at the very end of the line. In fact,
At night?
yes.
Up until the night time?
Yes, and the end of the line, in fact, was turned. If I can describe it, the Union line is coming like this, and the Confederates were actually attacking either on the end of it,
Mm-hmm.
or
You can turn your camera, I understand.
yeah.
That's
And you'll have to excuse me because my arm isn't in very good shape, but if this were the Union trench, or trenches, just generally speaking, they were attacked on the very end.
Mm-hmm.
At one point in time, as I understand it, the line at the very end was surrounded on 3 sides. The attack was finally resisted by wheeling the troops wheeling back and coming back in like that. There were also some barricades which the Federals had time to build earlier in the day, and these were significant in terms of the battle because they gave protection for Union troops. In addition, the Confederates were at a disadvantage on Culp's Hill because of because they were on the low ground. For one thing, as I said, it was a very rocky hill. Of course, that might have afforded them a little protection too, but it was difficult to negotiate and heavily wooded, as you can see even from some of the early what would you call this? This is a wood print, I believe, or a plate.
You could
I'd
show
wanna-
it like that.
Yeah, this is actually a plate of the morning of the third of the Confederate attack on Culp's Hill
This was the next morning.
the next morning.
So I
When
assume
we
the
made their attack.
Federals reinforced the hill after.
Yeah, let me read the text, since it's called Stewart's Brigade, renewing the Confederate attack on Culp's Hill the morning of the third day. Yeah. I'm sorry, go ahead. Interrupted you.
I'm not sure what I said. We'll get to.
I'm not sure I answered your question
I
either.
didn't mention anything about where Aaron Ben came from. Where did he come from?
Colesville. Where?
Could you know anything specific?
Where in Colesville,
Yeah.
do you mean? Oh, I suppose we could look it up in some
Well, we wouldn't.
plat maps and things, but no, I can't. Not right offhand.
So he's from the Binghamton area, right?
Yes.
You mentioned Windsor. Is that right?
Well, Colesville's not too far. Colesville's, I believe, just north of Windsor, isn't it? I think so. Is that town just north of it?
You mentioned he had a brother that was also involved, or a family member that was also involved in the battle.
But in that
Oh.
battle, no. There were other brothers of his who were involved in the Civil War, but not at Gettysburg. No.
I see. How did he get into his regiment? You mentioned he was drafted.
I don't know. I'd have to. If I mentioned, I don't know whether he volunteered or was drafted, but we could take a look at his military papers that I got from the National Archives.
Wait, when did he die? Do you recall anything?
Yes, I have to refer to my notes. But he died on May 1st, 1891.
So he died young then, actually, probably. Or
He died, yeah, I beg your pardon, what did you say?
that would have been like 25 years later, I suppose.
Yeah, in fact, there's a picture that I have of his tombstone. It is decorated with the flag each Veterans Day.
This is where he went to visit his grave.
Yep, Knox Cemetery. I believe that's in or near Aquaga. Well, this is a picture taken a few years ago, and that's my son Ryan standing by the gravestone. Not much. You can see the name Ben underneath it. How's that? Can you see that now?
Mhm.
You told me he was bummed a little
Mm-hmm.
bit about his being in captivity.
Yes.
And my innocence. That just
There's
off the
some
top of your
records.
head, maybe.
Well,
I don't want to get into too much detail.
all right. In November of 1863, I think he was returned to service from a missing in action status.
So he was exchanged, you mentioned, for
Yeah,
other.
yes, he was exchanged in a prisoner exchange.
So he was sent to Richmond.
Yes.
So he was actually sent to Richmond after the battle.
I might get that. I don't
That's
want
quite a
make
ways
mis-
to go.
Oh yeah, no, they took the prisoners down south.
Wait,
Yeah.
considering the rail system at the time, it was probably quite a trip.
I would guess so. But I don't think the Confederates had any trains to get out of Pennsylvania on, so
Mhm.
that's an interesting point.
Probably marched and.
Yeah, I would bet. Yeah.
Was he in a prison camp or maybe put in jail? Do you know?
Was he ever put
He
in?
wasn't actually in captivity very long because you mentioned that he was returned to Union service in November of '63.
Well, he was in a prisoner exchange.
Oh.
And there's a record of he's returned to duty in November of 1863.
Mhm.
if you give me a moment, I can give you specifics from a written affidavit. 1863, he was absent, missing in action at Gettysburg, Pennsylvania.
Oh, wait, are you recording now? Okay.
I'm reading from government records now, and from the Adjutant General's office, July 2nd, 63, when he was in, as I said before, missing in action from that date. September and October of 1863, he was absent in parole camp. It said he was in a parole camp. I don't know where that was, it doesn't say. And then there's some, can you make that out yourself? I can't. And to April, he was present, May and June 1864, absent, sick in hospital, Chattanooga. That was later on in his service career. He was reported as a corporal, mustered out at Elmira, New York, on October 9, 1865.
Okay, I think probably did.
Mm-hmm.
Could you, you mentioned an eye injury, so he wasn't actually injured in the battle itself when he was captured?
Well, let's take a look at his, from the Army report, okay? Got it. Somebody's testimony, written testimony.
Oh, really? A witness?
Captain, oh, looks like Corbell. Captain Corbell, Company F. This is, oh, okay. Okay, rolling? Oh, okay. Yeah, there was a report from the captain of his unit, his company, really, Captain Corbell, the captain of Company F, 137th New York Infantry. And he made a report which is dated the 24th day of October, 1865. He made a report before the clerk of the court record and in front for Broome County, and he personally appeared there to make the report about Aaron Benn, and that he knew Aaron Benn, and that he was the captain of Company F in the 137th Regiment, New York State, from the 18th of March 1864 up until said a regiment actually was discharged from the service of the United States. That he well knows Aaron Benn, and he was a corporal in Company F in 137th Regiment. And that said Aaron Benn, while in the service of the United States, in the line of his duty as a soldier, received an injury to his eyes when at or near Marietta, Georgia. And on or about the 16th day of June, 1864, said injury resulted from exposure while the said Aaron Benn was engaged in fighting and in battle with the forces of the enemy. The injury appeared to be severe and of the character of...
So he was, what did it say, he was injured in Georgia?
In or near Marietta, Georgia, right.
So he wasn't doing any battle? But
No,
while
it's
in Gettysburg he possibly got infected, or?
No, this is much later. No, this is a later date. Okay, so this is on or about the 16th day of June, 1864. This is after he was in the prisoner exchange and was back in the service. And this is involves Sherman's march through Georgia on their way to Atlanta.
Was he involved in this?
Yes.
Oh, so this is his action in that campaign now that we're describing?
Mm-hmm. This is, as I understand the history of the Civil War, this was just before the Battle of Kennesaw Mountain, which is about 27 June.
But actually he didn't receive any injuries from Gettysburg itself.
Not from Gettysburg
Okay.
itself.
Well, that's.
They say he was injured during this other engagement.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. My main concern is Gettysburg, so.
Okay.
Sort of. Oh, can you tell me when he was enlisted? When he signed up in?
Yes, I can. My understanding is probably a application for a pension. And it appears from the rolls and file in this office that Aaron Ben was enrolled on the 30th day of August 1862 in Colesville in Company F, 137th Regiment of New York, volunteers, they were the volunteers, to serve 3 years or during the war, and mustered into service as a corporal on the 13th day of September 1862 at Binghamton, New York, in Company F, the 137th Regiment of New York. A volunteer to serve 3 years.
August 13th, he was?
Mustered into service as a corporal on the 13th day of September. In other words, he actually showed up for duty that day. That's my understanding of it. He signed up earlier. And during war on the muster roll, Company F of that regiment for the months of March, April 1865.
So he was sort of a backup, perhaps? Or did he do service before Gettysburg? He was doing service?
Yes, apparently. No, there was no indication that he was backup. Backup, what do you mean a backup?
Like a reserve?
No, he wasn't. No, there was no, he was in active duty.
So he was probably with the Army of Potomac.
Yes, and the Historical Society of Broome County has records. For instance, I have something here. This may be from the New York State Archives, or it may be from either there or from the Broome County Historical Society. The New York Monuments Commission for the battlefields of Gettysburg and Chattanooga. There's a final report on the battlefield of Gettysburg. This is volume 3. It was published in Albany and published in 1900.
This is the list of...
So here's the monument that this monument is still there, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a more modern picture. Here it is, right here. Well, let me take it up to the camera so we can... Monument to the 137th New York. Well, this is 1995. I would guess this is probably around maybe 1990, 91 maybe.
He must have been to service in Binghamton?
Yes.
Okay. You can roll it now, I guess. What direction did the Army of the Potomac come from when it entered Gettysburg? You know, where the area was...
Right, from the direction of Washington is my understanding in general. There were a few forces in place or nearby, none to any great extent. They were rushed up.
Mm-hmm.
As it was my understanding from Washington, D.C. area.
Mm-hmm. So he was with the Army of the Potomac, we can assume.
That's right.
Would you know when he arrived on the battlefield?
Yes, I can give you the specifics of that. Reading, want to go ahead and roll it? Okay. I'm reading from the history of the 137th Regiment, which is actually written by the surgeon for the regiment. I think you got it on videotape before, did you? Okay. Yeah, he talks about their various movements on the days preceding the engagement at Gettysburg, and I could read a fair amount, but I think it essentially starts on page 941 of this text and goes on for quite some pages. are there any particular sections that you have a real interest in? I think that you were talking to me about which direction they came from, was your original question, right?
I think the more important thing is when did you arrive?
Oh, when did they arrive? Okay. Okay, on the 30th, I mean, that being June 30th, we crossed the state line into Pennsylvania and camped early in the
State
afternoon.
line from Maryland, I assume?
Yeah, I believe so. And camped early in the afternoon on the north side of Littlestown. Okay. They had been in, because prior to that, on the June 28th, they had been marching on the road leading to Frederick, passing through Jefferson, Centerville, and Eagle Mills. And then, as I said, on the 30th, they crossed the line into Pennsylvania. On the morning of July 1st, we marched to a place on the Baltimore and Gettysburg Pike called Two Taverns. Now, that's getting close to Gettysburg.
So this is the morning of July 1st?
Yes. And halted for dinner. About 3 p.m. we heard the cannonading in our advance and received orders to move as rapidly as possible in the direction of the firing. The 1st Division turned off to the right and moved towards the field of battle on the east of Rock Creek. Now, Rock Creek runs to the east of Gettysburg and to the east of Culp's Hill. It was on that map that we showed earlier. Okay. And about 4:30 p.m. that division confronted Wolf's Hill, which is east of Culp's Hill and on the opposite side of Rock Creek. So this is a position somewhat east of Culp's Hill.
There were Confederates in the area?
Well, it doesn't say that, it just said they went there. On reaching the vicinity of Gettysburg, our division, the 2nd, was sent to the left of our army, which would have been down towards the end of the hook where the line would be tied on, a regular hook, you know.
Who was sent there again?
The 137th Regiment.
So did they go perhaps to Little Round Top?
It doesn't say.
That was in another very strategic part of the entire battle.
But before morning, we moved to the right of our line on the west side of Rock Creek and took a position on the slope of Culp's Hill, facing eastward towards Rock Creek. Here the men threw up earthworks the best they could without entrenching tools, and here they remained until the end of the fight. The breastworks were completed about noon of the 2nd day. The 2nd of July, rather.
So that's about all it says in that time frame?
Yeah, well, then he goes on to describe in detail what happened, just about hour by hour. And you can, I'm happy to read it, or you can read it on your own.
I'll do it.
You're going to have to make copies of it or
It's too
something.
detailed for this.
Oh, I don't know. Okay.
How is Aaron related to us?
All right, he's to me, and I'm your uncle. He is my great-grandfather's brother. So I'll be your great-great-grandfather's brother.
How did you find out about him in the first place?
Your mother was looking up some of the family history, I believe at the Broome County Historical Society, and was looking up family names, Ben, Crawford, and so forth.
Were you interested in Gettysburg at the time, and this just sort of piqued your interest?
No. Oh, no, I didn't have, well, of course I've been interested in Gettysburg as a historical event, but when she found out that there was a family member that had actually been there, it piqued my interest quite a bit.
Okay, I'm just going to go back to our questions sort of now. Does Gettysburg hold any personal significance?
Personal significance. Well, in terms of my interest in history and, politics of the time. It has some bearing, I suppose, on myself.
Okay, have you ever visited Gettysburg?
Yes.
What was it like being
Well, it was,
there? Was it perhaps eerie, or
no.
not eerie, maybe? Felt strange, maybe, being there? That all these events happening, so many died.
No, the opposite. Of course, by that time I'd read quite a bit about it, seen pictures of the lay of the land, and so there was a feeling of familiarity. So it didn't seem unusual in any way.
So would you say it was just curiosity? What did it feel like being there? You know?
It was quite an honor being in such a place where people had bravely fought.
Did you walk the battlefield?
I walked different parts of it.
Which parts?
Well, I took a detailed tour with a tour guide of Culp's Hill. I actually hired someone who had expertise on that part of the battlefield.
So it was a guide of Culp's Hill in that arena?
Yes.
Are you familiar with any other aspects, like Pickett's Charge and Little Round Top?
I've read about them and certainly have studied about them. And Little Round Top, the defense by the forces of Maine was quite impressive. But
It sounds to me like they're related. Aaron Ben's, their regiment's fighting there in Round Top because they were both at the extreme flanks.
right,
and the
they're both
Confederates-
holding the ends.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
And that was,
there's more pressure on those soldiers because
and it seemed that the Confederates had more of a professional force, whereas I think from recollection that the Union had much militia, inexperienced or not as battle hardened, because they were just rushed to the scene.
I think
So-
I've been told the same.
So, in fact, had the Confederates turned the flank, which they almost did, they could have turned it into a major victory for the South.
Yes.
So it was really a very close thing, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, it was.
That's about it, except could you describe how it was, how you looked up this information, and what you said, why?
Well, sources of information include Broome County Historical Society, for one, the New York State Archives in Albany, the National Archives in Washington, D.C. It's very helpful if you have a person's name and regiment, dates of service, if at all possible, to get these records.
Explain the Washington Archives?
And the National Archives, those are in Washington, D.C., and those are the,
Was this a
Was it
huge
critical?
facility?
yes.
Yes. Could you enlighten me on what it's like in there, how I go about searching for information if I should
Mhm.
have to go there?
If you went down there, first of all, there are people there to help,
Mhm.
and you would go in, and you give, just as I recall, there's information service, so you would at first tell them the general area you were interested in, saying that you wanted to find information about a particular Civil War veteran, for instance, and then they would direct you to a certain department, and then you would actually fill out a form presenting information. And now you don't actually have to travel there. You can do some of this by mail. They will obtain service records or some critical records by written
Is
request.
there a fee for the,
I think
how
so.
do they dredge up the records? You just make copies of the records in the facility? Wow.
Yes, you can't take the records
Of
themselves out,
course.
yeah. But you can make copies,
Is there a fee for, like a finder's fee? Some sort of?
No,
No, this is all
this is
public
our
advantage.
property, this belongs to people in the United
And
States.
all branches, Broome County, New York, and National Archives?
Yes.